Hey there everybody, so today we are going to be doing an entire, complete, original, aka FNAF 1 to Ultimate Custom Night, the original series timeline. This is my interpretation of events. There is some give and take. We are not going to be including any, and I mean any, of the Fazbear Frights and or Tales from the Pizzaplex lore. That's cut. This is just baseline Five Nights at Freddy's, as well as the Silver Eyes trilogy with massive quotation marks. The only thing that we're using from the Silver Eyes is names and positions in the company, which is the most basic stuff. But we do get names like William Afton and Henry Emily from the Silver Eyes, so that is the only reason why we're using those. This is baseline Five Nights at Freddy's 1 to Ultimate Custom Night, and that is it. That is all that we're doing in today's video. We will be doing an expanded timeline somewhere down the road, but this is all that you need to know to go and see the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. This is a good refresher for anyone that's a longtime fan that just maybe fell out of it recently or is just wanting to remember some of the stuff that happened all the way up to this point. Anyway, guys, let's jump right into it with the first event. Now, the first event in our timeline takes place in 1973, and that is with the establishment of Fredbear's Family Diner. A nice dining experience for families, kids, birthday parties, things of that nature. The first location was established in Hurricane, Utah by business partners Henry, Emily, and William Afton, respectively. Now, both men had their families. They had wives, children. William had 3, Henry had 1, that being his only daughter, Charlotte. Both these men were so passionate about their business that they came together out of their own projects, with Henry working on his own characters beforehand and William just being great with technology and even better with the financial side of things. Things were great. Those first few months were so prosperous for this new company that several different sister locations appeared all throughout the United States, and even some in Canada. Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria was not yet on the scene, but Fredbear's Family Diner took off so well in the public consciousness that this place had merchandise, newspapers, pizza delivery services, merchandise, tons of great things. It was a phenomenon. But all that changed the very moment that the first death occurred. And that took place with the death of William Afton's very own youngest son. Only 10 years after Fredbear's was established, a death occurred. Not only scaring the employees that Afton and Emily had hired on to run the suits, but the cashiers, the very patrons that loved this area, were too afraid to take their children in after what had happened. Michael Afton, William Afton's oldest son, picked up his youngest son with some of his friends and placed him into the mouth of Fredbear on stage whilst he was activated. Fredbear was a simple yet a very, very interestingly complex machine. The spring-lock suits were not designed to house moisture, as this would cause the locks to pop and the machinery to close in, not only to create somewhat of a skeleton on the inside of the suit, but also to help them go off and retain mass for whenever they are doing their, show movements. It's also a very effective way to create space for them to be worn as mascot suits. Now, keep in mind, this animatronic was on stage performing, doing just basic movements, maybe, some singing or whatever, maybe some waving. This animatronic suit was in animatronic mode. But somehow, the spring locks in the jaws of Fredbear failed. they failed. Even though they were in a folded out position, they most likely popped, leading the jaw to slam down onto the skull of William Afton's youngest son. He did not die immediately, but he suffered great and very grave injuries. We see this in the events of FNAF 4. During the end of night minigames, we see this child be essentially tortured by his brother during the course of his birthday week, and it all caps off with the bite of 83. Now, the place is shut down. There's blood all over the mascots. The stage it's just caked in blood. William Afton's youngest son is sent to hospital, where he later dies of his injuries. He cannot rest. He cannot see. All he knows is pain, and that his friends have not left yet. He is stuck, essentially, in a purgatory that he cannot escape. He's still there, but he can't do anything about it. He then proceeds to latch on to the very thing that ended his life. Not Michael, but the Fredbear suit. That being said, the next year comes around, and as if William Afton's miserable life could not get any worse, his wife leaves him and takes his daughter with him. Elizabeth comes to see William every weekend, and Mr. Afton is left with the only soul responsible for what happened in his eyes. This is Michael's fault, and Michael knows it. And William Afton makes it known to Michael. The abuse sustained by Michael Afton is substantial. He is so guilty for what happened, but at the same time he knows he cannot undo what happened. William beats and just hurts Michael so bad, to the point where Michael starts to resent and fear his father. He has to get out. He has to escape, and he somehow still has a connection to his younger brother that he killed. He goes and visits his grave, even if it angers William. William hates him. He wants to see Michael dead. William takes a back seat to Henry. Henry gives him time off. The company is liquidated, its assets sold, the place is bought out, and just a random old pizza chain is established. But not before one last tragedy occurs. In 1984, something snapped. Even though Henry had sent William to take some much-needed time off after the death of his son, and after having had a very messy divorce with his wife, William comes back to Fredbear's family diner, a drunken mess. He drives his car, and that very, very nice for the time, purple-painted car. Somewhat catchy, somewhat nice, but there are no cameras to watch him roll up. And just as William, in a drunken stupor, looks towards the front of the building, he sees the child standing next to the door. Henry's very own daughter. It is time to make him feel what I feel. Henry will feel the pain that William feels. Charlotte Emily is brutally murdered, either strangled or stabbed to death, outside of Freddy's.
Meant to say Fredbear's.
Outside of Fredbear's. Just as the security puppet frees itself and attempts to fly out the building, just as her body is dragged into the back alley and left to die. Charlotte dies and latches on to the one thing that was built to protect her: the puppet. That is the end of the Fredbear saga. The year is 1985. Although Fredbear's has been completely liquidated, its assets sold off, the animatronics retired, the Fredbear suit destroyed, the company is somehow rebranded into Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. A family diner where you can come and take your kids, celebrate their birthdays, and have just a great old time. It's essentially Fredbear's, but with a new coat of paint. With new management behind the scenes and a very family-friendly, family-oriented aura around it. There are some nice little things that go on at Freddy's, such as enhanced security, some nice new precautions in stake, that being security cameras with the brand new technology rolling out in the 80s. But things are going well for the brand new company that is Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, aka Fazbear Entertainment. The new animatronics of Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy come onto the scene. Pirates Cove is placed into several locations around the country, and all Fredbear's Family Diner locations are rebranded. The older animatronics are either sent back to the warehouse or they are stuffed into the parts and service room or supply closets for cleaning and dismemberment, and some were labeled for destruction shortly after the company was rebranded because they do not want that bad PR from the event that occurred in 1983 with the death of Afton's son. And Henry is nowhere to be found. He has completely fell off the face of the earth, essentially. With his daughter killed and her body discovered and laid to rest, he moves on. But that does not mean that the pain that was implemented to his daughter is gone. At the old Fredbear's Family Diner location, where a pizzeria chain had came and failed, it was then later rebranded at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The animatronics are implemented. Some of them have some strange quirks, but it is a very loved place. Hurricane is back on the animatronic trend, and things are going well. The parents have moved on from what occurred to the point where it starts to become a bit of a myth. William Afton is just shut up in his house the entire time. His son, now around 15 to 16 years old, is getting to that point where he can go hunt for a job. And Freddy Fazbear's Pizza is going very well when Afton gets an idea. Afton is out of the job, his name's slandered. He changes his name to William Schmidt. Thus, Michael's name is also changed to Michael Schmidt. And things are starting to look up. William has found a job at the new Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. He was hired on as a day shift mechanic, where he'd be working in the back solely with the animatronics. But something happens. One of them starts to act strange towards him. The puppet. The puppet that was infused with the soul of Charlotte, Henry's dead daughter, acts strange, aggressive, and just paranormal towards William. And it drives him wild. He doesn't understand it. All he knows is that he wants to understand it. It is almost as if he has created a form of life from death. He knows that she's in there because he can feel it. Some time passes, a few months go by. But Afton starts putting on his Spring Bonnie suit that he so much adored. While Fredbear was always a fan favorite, Spring Bonnie was always shafted. The two were still much loved mascots, with Fredbear stealing the show. Fredbear was much loved by Henry, and was even sometimes worn by Henry. And Afton favored Bonnie, Spring Bonnie to be exact. So he put back on his suit that he used to perform in the early days of the company. And he starts catching the attention from the kids. The patrons do not realize that that's not a robot. That thing waving in the back, drawing their children in, is the very man who did the killing of Henry's own daughter. It was there that William lured and killed 5 children in the back room. The missing children's incident had occurred. Just as the reports of missing children had started to roll in, the rumors going around Freddy Fazbear's Pizza had started to bother the patrons yet again. However, this time they were very skeptical to believe it. There were no bodies found. There was no footage of the man that supposedly had taken their children. Are you sure? Are you really sure that that happened? No, they weren't. William got away with it. Again. Or so he had thought. William had known that these machines were living, especially after what happened with the puppet. But now, William had just unleashed a whole nother can of worms. Those children that he had killed did not leave. They did not disperse. The puppet came along and placed their souls into these animatronics. Their bodies physically stuffed inside of the metal bodies as the animatronics moved during the day, squishing their soft skin until they rotted away. Their blood caked into the metal, turning into just a random sludgy mess inside the suit. Smelling absolutely terrible, the suits were inspected and the bodies were taken away by Fazbear Entertainment, and most likely destroyed. Destroying evidence that possibly could have led to these children finally being set free. William Afton had made one major misstep. He only brought more opposition to his future endeavors by killing these children. But just as the place closes down for remodeling, brand new animatronics are brought in with some brand new technology. That being facial recognition software. Oh boy. If Afton was going to come back, he was going to have to try this time, because they knew who he was. They knew that Mr. Schmidt was Mr. Afton. And with this, the toy animatronics were introduced, including the break apart and put back together attraction herself, the Mangle, or the Foxy variant of this era. This takes place in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, but just before the gameplay starts, we know that Mr. Afton got up to some more antics, most likely screwing around with the toy animatronics facial recognition software, leading to them becoming a little glitchy, to the point where there's another bite. If there's one thing you need to know about FNAF 2, it's that the year is 1987, meaning that just as the rebrand came around in 1986, where the place was closed down for a few months, the new animatronics have been in the works for a while. They're implemented. The Wizards are stashed in the back and used for spare parts. Just as the toy animatronics are placed onto that stage and are first toyed around with, and their security features are starting to fail and glitch out. What you need to know is that they have been serviced using parts from haunted animatronics, meaning that the toy animatronics might just so happen to receive some of that remnant and or possessed metal. So the toy animatronics themselves might be running on a system failure, or they might be running on possession, even if it isn't as extreme as the Wizards. But with the rebrand just around the corner with 1986, going into 1987, Fazbear Entertainment is prospering once again. The rumors are once again at their peak with the killings and the children going missing, but the killings cannot be tied to the pizzeria. As such, business as usual. So, just as more patrons flood in to see the rebranding and the brand new animatronics, the new characters of Balloon Boy and this female Foxy variant, that of which we know as Funtime Foxy or the Mangle, children tear this poor creature limb from limb. I mean, exposing its metal interior to the world with all sorts of random gunk forming all over its body, and some very nasty looking either rust or smears of a brown color. Anyway, we're not going to think too hard on that. Just as the system tampering happens, things start to go south really quickly to the point where William takes a back seat again and falls out of the company. He goes off and takes a break. Maybe he takes a leave, but he just doesn't work there anymore for a short while. As such, William Afton gets up to his own projects. He's been working on his own animatronics for a very long time. Even if he did work with Fazbear Entertainment, he was always building a passion project of sorts, whether it be a Springlock suit or these brand new animatronics using lots of wires, cables, and very interesting synthetic materials that he starts to develop a amalgamation of sorts of wires, a new type of endoskeleton that later go on to become a modernized Springlock suit or a Funtime animatronic. He starts developing Circus Baby's Pizza World, and the Funtime animatronics come onto the scene. But just as that happens, William goes back to the pizzeria. He puts on that suit and that security guard outfit. He regains the trust, and he had worked there not even weeks ago. So he goes back in. The animatronics are freaking out, but there's a birthday party going on. Nothing too crazy. Right up until the Mangle on the ceiling swoops up and drops down onto the head of Jeremy Fitzgerald, removing his frontal lobe from his head. I'm talking full on damages that dang thing. She crunched into his head, fracturing his skull and forcefully removing part of his brain. I do not know how he did not die, but he did not die in that pizzeria. He suffered so much blunt force trauma from plastic teeth, as well as metal infused animatronic endoskeleton teeth that should not have the ability to bite through a human skull. But just like with Fredbear, somehow this thing had more bite force than a freaking crocodile, destroying this man's crown of his skull right here, crunching down and removing part of his frontal lobe. He is rushed to hospital and he does not die. That man lives, damn it. And William takes more victims. We see this in the Save Him minigame. Bodies spewing all over the pizzeria, blood pooling on the floors. No one is there. The animatronics are active. Withered Freddy is walking around the pizzeria. He's been activated by the puppet. The animatronics are all on stage, the toy animatronics at least, their eyes vacant and hollow. The body is slumped against the stage. The police had been there earlier. The bodies haven't been removed yet, as they are collecting forensic evidence. But Withered Freddy goes around searching, following the puppet, only to be shut down by the very man who killed him, William Afton. Somehow, William got back into the pizzeria after his killing spree, and he went to work. He turned off Withered Freddy and somehow managed to stop the puppet from placing the souls within the toy animatronics. So we thought. Because he failed. William failed. The marionette put a soul within the Mangle animatronic. As we can see, the Mangle is moving whenever you go down to Kids Cove. Mangle is aware. Mangle is alive. There is a body in her room. She's standing in a pool of blood, walking back and forth. You could say, oh, that's just the dead security guard. He didn't die. William killed a kid, and the marionette placed the soul inside of Mangle, which is why she is moving. She is aware, and she knows. But just like last time, Afton gets away with it. How does he get away with it again? The police interrogate him, but they can't link him to what happened. I don't know if the police are terrible in Hurricane, but this man has gotten away with at least almost a dozen murders now. But he gets away with it. The toy animatronics are scrapped, and the place is forgotten for a solid 10 years. The withered animatronics go on to be refurbished. And just like that, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, even though it's on its last leg, comes back in the early 1990s. It's 1990. The United States is faltering a little bit here back and forth with the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza trend, but there are still a few locations still managing to withstand themselves. Hurricane, Utah has seen several rebrandings of the Fazbear franchise over only the course of 30 years. And this one is sent right back to the same old location, much smaller than it had been with the new and improved Fazbear's Pizza. The new classic animatronics have been refurbished. It's the same old characters you know and love. Foxy the Pirate returns. The marionette has been placed into storage. The toy animatronics are shoved to the side and scrapped, used for parts, and sold out as soon as possible. Most of them are destroyed for their faulty systems. This is a much smaller budget because Fazbear Entertainment is dying. They are dying so hard. They cannot manage to outlive their bad PR. They are still visited by some patrons, but not many. They're a dying company. The only reason why this store is still open is because it is the home store of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. It's the only reason. It's a legacy store. Freddy's opens on a much smaller budget than usual, leading to several environmental problems. First of all, there is black mold growing in the ceiling. There's water leaking in. The building is run down. It's not been refurbished in a very long time. And things start to smell like black mold. It's not good. The safe room has been just sitting there, just a relic of its time. It was used for storage at one point, but now there's just cobwebs and things all over the place. But they placed the Spring Bonnie and Fredbear suit, or at least parts of the Fredbear suit that are still around. They place that in the safe room, and they just kind of lock it up so that way no one really messes with it. And this is where Mike Schmidt comes back into the story, because he talks with one of the managers at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and he lands himself a job. That being said, the phone guy is working here as well. He is taking over the night shift management, and he hires Mike on with the prologue of phone calls every night, all the way up until his first week is over. But unfortunately, phone guy himself gets offed. He gets dead. And that happens on night 5 of Mike's calls, which is most likely why Mike hasn't heard from him in a while. So that's quite unfortunate because they were all pre-recorded. The animatronics, although they are refurbished, they are still just as haunted as they were before. They are just now more mobile. Their endoskeletons have been cleaned, but most of their parts have been recycled from past models. There is one thing that happens, though, is while this is all going on in the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza version 3, William Afton has his own project going on. The sister location, like we talked about before. The sister location was booming. They are not linked with Fazbear Entertainment simply because William Afton still has rights, at least some rights, to the characters of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. So he builds himself Funtime Freddy and Funtime Foxy. Freddy and Foxy were always characters that Mr. Afton had cared about, and so he pushed them into the limelight and gave them some new clown aesthetics. He also created Circus Baby in the image of his own daughter, Elizabeth, and Ballora in the image of his wife. Even though she had left him heartbroken and lonely, he still loved her. And he still felt pain and regret for what had happened. Mr. Afton is a monster, but he is a broken man. There's also a few different little prototype animatronics around the building, that being the Lolbit, or the security system, Yindo, which is just his nickname of just a random endoskeleton, and things of that nature. Mr. Afton starts selling out these animatronics to go to birthday parties. So he would load them up in a van and bring them out, put them on a little stage, and they would, perform for kids and stuff, blow up balloons, just have a great old time. Except the fact that they were built to capture and kill children. Mr. Afton, what the royal fuck? I don't mean to curse, but dude, imagine your son has a birthday, so you buy out this expensive animatronic for probably at least $500 for 5 hours worth of entertainment, and then your son goes missing, only to see that the animatronic bear is holding its chest I don't know where he is. There's just casually some blood leaking out of his suit. Mr. Afton is such a deranged guy that he built these animatronics that people would rent to capture children whenever they are alone. Funtime Foxy is built to lure. Funtime Freddy is built to literally capture and crush children in his stomach capsule. Circus Baby has a claw that shoots out of her chest, holding an ice cream cone, and then drops it and pulls in the child whenever they get close to grab it. Ballora is built to misdirect and mimic. He built an entire squad of child murderers. Bro is dedicated. But aside from that, things go wrong whenever Elizabeth comes for the weekend, and Mr. Afton is showing her around the new animatronics. He has an open house where the public comes in, sees his animatronics, everyone is having fun, kids are running around, playing in the ball pits, and playing with the animatronics, having fun, giving bonbon high fives, all sorts of great stuff, right up until Elizabeth gets alone with Circus Baby, And Circus Baby does, shocker, what she was built to do and kills her. Outright kills her. Offers her some vanilla ice cream? No. Vanilla's the worst flavor. Crush, boom, you're dead. Circus Baby gets possessed, and then that is where we see the events of Sister Location take place. Just as Mike loses his job at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza because it goes bankrupt and they capsize, and the place closes down, and they just leave the animatronics there. Everything's just as it was, except the fact that no one comes around anymore. Mike loses his job at Freddy's, and so he starts working for his dad, and Mr. Afton gives him the goal: you must free your sister. Why doesn't Mr. Afton do this? Because he is up to some more shenanigans, by God. He goes back to Freddy's version 3 and is destroying the animatronics. He is luring them into the safe room where they start to scramble their map and destroys them. Each and every single animatronic, one by one. Destroys them, removes their parts, and he brings them back to the sister location. Right up until the 5th night, where he goes to come back and take his spring Bonnie suit, and all the souls that he had once killed at one point trap him against the wall and start to torment him. He gets scared, and he goes to do something that he should have thought twice about. In such a panic, Mr. Afton did not think about the environment that this suit had been rotting in. The place is damp. Black mold is growing everywhere. The walls are literally rotting out. The ceiling is falling in on itself. This place is a crap hole. And guess what he does? He picks up the rabbit suit and he starts to put it on. Which is all said and good whenever you're an expert at it. But this rabbit suit was rotting. Moisture and mold had started to form in this suit. And Mr. Afton did not take that into perspective. The suit clamps down on his face. His body is crushed, and he starts to bleed to death. Mr. Afton dies. He is tortured inside of the Spring Bonnie suit until his life ends. As his vision starts to fade, he looks up to see the Golden Freddy suit twitching and the eyes glowing. Mr. Afton will live beyond death, but it will be painful, and they will make sure of that. Although Mr. Afton is dead, his company does not immediately fall. Since he kept a bunker or a workshop underneath his house, all of the animatronics are taken and placed under there shortly after Mr. Afton's demise, because the restaurant is sold off and is reclaimed by the state since Mr. Afton hadn't paid taxes in a while. Mr. Afton's body is boarded up in the safe room at the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza shortly after Henry Emily finds his corpse rotting in the suit. Henry knows pain. He knows pain. And finding his best friend dead in a suit that he used to dance, sing, and be so proud of was the last straw for him. Henry debates some terrible things. He's lost everything. His wife, his daughter, his best friend, his company, his fortune. He has nothing else left to do. Henry wants to die. Henry does not want to be here anymore. He has no reason for being. But he also knows that there is something else wrong with these animatronics. Henry knows that there is something strange that is afoot. He leaves with the pizzeria boarded up, and the location is set to rest for nearly 30 years. Right up until the opening of Fazbear's Fright, the horror attraction. But just as Freddy's safe room is boarded up, Michael Afton messes around a little too much in the sister location and is brutally amputated from his own flesh. A metal beam known as the scooper, which is used to pry endoskeletons out of suits for the Funtime animatronic variations, is shoved into this man's stomach and rips his organs out, making just enough room for this strange clown thing to crawl inside of him and take control of his body as if he was a massive human mannequin. It leaves the building and roams the streets free right up until Michael's corpse cannot take this anymore, and he collapses, with the innard amalgamation coming out of his mouth and fleeing into a nearby storm drain. A voice ruminates in Michael's head. You won't die. It is his sister. You won't die. You will not die. And he doesn't. His body rises back up, essentially a zombie, and he stumbles back home. The Afton family household belongs to the Afton family. And Michael hangs out there, waiting in the shadows. Right up until the reemergence of the Fazbear brand with Fazbear's Fright, the horror attraction. The year is 2023. Things have long fluctuated in the world, but Michael Afton, still watching The Immortal and the Restless reruns on his classic 1990s TV with the little rabbit ear antennae, is sitting there, watching as an ad plays. Fazbear's Fright, the horror attraction, coming this fall. He watches in horror. Every single memory floods back to him of everything that he had ever done wrong, of everything that his father had ever done wrong, all of the death, his very own sister, his very own brother that he helped to kill, are being mocked in this location by some fancy bastard that looks to make bank on the pain of the Afton family. Mike is infuriated, and he does what he does best. Meddles where he shouldn't be meddling. He signs up for that job, and he gets it. He signs up on the precaution that he had been a Fazbear employee, and they love it. They said, a Fazbear employee, we're taking him. We're going to put him down as the security guard for Fazbear's Fright, just as a precaution to make sure that no one comes and messes with anything. But they needed him to keep what's inside. I could not imagine the feelings that Mike must have been feeling whenever he walked into that building surrounded by artifacts of essentially something that ruined his life. His brother, the other kids, his own father, even dead at the hands of his own creation. So much pain must have been felt in Michael's heart whenever he walked into that building, seeing those musty costumes, the smell, sounds, arcade cabinets, the tile floor, even walking into that building itself, and just feeling the atmosphere, again for the first time, must have been surreal for him. But even though Mike got this job, He did it because he known what was going to happen. He knew what he needed to do. He needed to end it. Finally end it. Because his father's reign of terror had to come to an end. He knows what happened. And now it's his time to rise up and finally dismantle what his father had done. Until the second night rolls around. The Springtrap is brought into Fazbear's Fright, and Michael checks those cameras, and he sees his own father staring back at him. He's dead now. His rotting corpse staring through the mascot costume. And he looks angry. Although he watches him with calculated movements, he knows that his father is angry. I could not imagine Michael's feelings. Really, try to put yourself in his shoes. This man that you fear and hate is standing right in front of you, a rotting corpse in a rabbit suit that he used to kill children, that he destroyed your family with. This man that you broke to the point where he killed others because he wanted to kill you so bad that he had to take it out on somebody else, or else he knew he'd get caught. Sends shivers down your spine, doesn't it? Mike does this, seeing phantoms and visions the entire time. But he gets through it until night 5, when he burns the place to the ground. The place explodes, and Mike slips out the back door. Massive balls of fire rise up, just consuming everything in the building. And finally, the suits are burnt to ash. The old retro posters on the walls burn up. The mold burns, releasing massive clouds of just spore and things you would not want to breathe in. And Michael finally puts an end to his father. Or so he thought. Because Springtrap made it out. And Mike knows that too. He is going to come and find you. He will come find you. Mike says, I'm going to come find you. And Mike goes home and relinquishes his entire life, essentially. He just stays back in the shadow. But Henry is not sitting back. Henry has a plan. He knows, because Fazbear's Fright, the management behind Fazbear's Fright, contacted Henry. They contacted Henry, and Henry gave them information on where they can find artifacts. This was Henry's one last hurrah to see what else was left out there. And maybe, just maybe, see if his daughter is still here, because he knows that his daughter would be called to that place, and sure enough, she was. She appears on the cameras in Five Nights at Freddy's 3 in her puppet suit. She is still there, tied to the location, tied to the souls that she helped carry all those years ago. Even though their bodies are destroyed and dismantled and placed into another entity, she is still there to keep watch of them and give them their happiest day. Elizabeth and the Entered Amalgamation are still roaming the streets, and now they have broken up, leading us into what is known as Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, and or Freddy Fazbear's Pizza version 4, aka Henry's Trap. The year is 2026. A few years have passed since Fazbear's Fright, and since the Springtrap has once again been set loose on the world. Mike has been hiding in the shadows. Elizabeth has now broken off the Entered Amalgamation. Golden Freddy is nowhere to be found, but the souls are still active. The animatronics are now taking the form of Molten Freddy, and Springtrap has now torn bits from his suit to release himself of the animatronic programming that once contained his anger in Five Nights at Freddy's 3, and he has now rebuilt himself into Afton, or Scrap Trap, as he would be known later. Henry builds Lefty to track, lure, and encapsulate the puppet, his daughter, and bring her to a location where he would once again do all in his power to destroy what has become of his brand. He lures them all back, all of them, together in one place. And finally, Mike, although he might not have intended so, returns as well. His dead body, so rapidly aged now, it is amazing the fact that the remnant has held his corpse together. Henry knows that Mike has no purpose either, and although it seems selfish of Henry, he chooses to make Mike die as well, to finally put an end to the Afton family. They're all dead. Afton's wife has long died, Elizabeth's dead, the crying child is deceased, and now it's time for Michael and William to both rest as well. Henry gives a speech at the end of it all, resulting in his ending speech where he cuts off Elizabeth and lights the place ablaze, essentially turning the building into a massive oven and destroying everything. Until that's retconned later, but Afton screaming as he slowly burns and falls into the void of what would later be known as his own hell. This leads us into Ultimate Custom Night. This is Afton's Purgatory. Ultimate Custom Night is simple. Golden Freddy has not moved on. Henry's daughter rests with him. They have moved on. They are no longer on this earth. The children's souls have moved on because the remnant has been burnt and released. They are gone. They are at rest. But Golden Freddy is still angry. Elizabeth, her soul has been freed. But William will be made to suffer. Cassidy will not let William move on. She is one being that helped keep him alive this entire time, and she will be damned if she lets him rest. She kills him over and over and over again. And that's the end of the story. All the other characters that have been implemented to suffer under William are now at rest. Except for Golden Freddy, the vengeful spirit, who will torture Afton for the rest of his existence for everything he's done. And that is the end of the Five Nights at Freddy's timeline. Afton is in hell. And that is the end. At least for this part. Thank you all so very much for watching. I know this has been about an hour long. Thank you all very much for listening to me ramble. I know this isn't very detailed, but we will put in the extra lore later. But this is the baseline story. I know that there's a lot that's kind of subjective, and we'll talk about that later on the part 2, which I'll probably make in about a couple months or so. This is all you needed to know about the base Five Nights at Freddy's story. Thank you guys so much for watching. Peace out, and bye-bye!